At a convention 3 years ago, I was able to lay eyes upon Sabotage's studio, The Messenger. Unfortunately, I didn't play it, my friends did. Eventually, I did stumble onto it during a Steam sale and thought, why not? Friends spoke kindly of it, and critics, whether they be independent or the untrustworthy mainstream journalists, all gave it glowing praises. Initially, I was pleased, but I can't continue with this analysis if I do not go into further details about its latter half. The traditional structure of graphics, gameplay, and music will not do it justice and cover properly the issues. Just so you know, The Messenger starts as a side-scrolling platformer reminiscent of efforts like Ninja Gaiden in the classic Castlevania games. It then transforms into a Metroidvania halfway through, and that's when it commits its biggest mistake. I assume most of you know what a Metroidvania is, but if you're new to all of this, just know that it's the contraction of Metroid and Castlevania. It refers to their design elements, games with many different paths that open up gradually. You come back to block paths with new skills and items to progress further. I can never be too informative, that's the point of the channel. I really like that design trend, and I love Metroid, but Metroid this is not. It carries all the flaws, but none of the charm of the genre. All flaws that were fixed within this type of game are there or almost. The main issue is that the messenger has you traversing a layout without proper travel options. When reaching the second third of the game, you go from 8 to 16-bit inspired levels. It's a great initial reveal. While it doesn't accurately recreate those styles, you wouldn't want that actually, it does a great job of emulating them. The colors are full and the animation's amazing. I especially like the one where your character twirls. It was difficult back then to show a sprite from every conceivable angle. Most of the time, the sprite would be mirrored on the Z-axis and there would be no animation for turning around. Not only are the graphics changed, but so is the music. The sound compression becomes different and the tracks are more layered. The 16-bit versions really go far for that Genesis feel. You can hear the twang in the tracks. Unfortunately, going back to each level isn't always fun. The equipment you receive doesn't necessarily cut that much into traversal, and the fast travel is limited. Checkpoints act as portals that lead from the levels to your hub world, the Tower of Time. You can go from that level back to the tower, but if you wish to travel to another level from the tower, you have to use specific portals. Let me clarify. The portals are the checkpoints. Most of them lead you back to the shop, and from the shop inside the tower you can go back into the levels. So if you take the checkpoint into the shop and you take the same portal back, you can go back and forth from the level to the shop. However, if you enter the tower, so you might travel to an entirely different level, you need to get to a specific portal. Unfortunately, not all levels get portals. It means traveling on foot to certain levels from another one that has a portal. Every time. When you combine that with the lack of traversing options, it becomes a drag really quickly. The platforming never evolves and going back again and again becomes tedious. Through all of this, you will have to go back in a specific order because the game lies to you. It gives you the impression that you're now non-linear, but it is not. When seeing the portals, you get the impression that it's now for you to choose where to go. Some portals are locked, but for the most part it seems more open. However, there's a lot of prerequisites to going to certain places. When you get the order, it's not that bad, but when stumbling on your own, it's painful. They clearly knew this because you can simply pay for hints, quote unquote. You literally get the answer. The actual hints are vague, so you're much better off paying for the directions. Let me give you an example of the tedium. I always wanted to do this in a review, a long exposition sequence that highlights obvious design flaws. To get to the elemental garden, you first need to free Manfred the dragon from the ice. To do that, you need to rescue the other messenger that was cursed. To free her, you need to finish a level called La Rivière Turquoise. To get to that level, you need to get to the dark caves. For the dark caves, you need the candle to actually see. To get the candle, you need to plant seeds to get tea leaves for your master. That only happens if you go to Crag Mountain to plant them and use the rifts to time travel. Finally, when that's done, you can give the tea leaves to your master and start the sequence. If that felt tedious to listen to, well, guess what? It was tedious to play. Especially when you have the expectation of being non-linear. In Metroid, you get general ray points and you figure a way to your objective, and you can make the sequences faster with methods both intended and not intended by the devs. The structure in general is fun to interact with because you have new abilities and paths. The game should have stayed linear. While its present is pretty pleasant, but not enough to be stretched out like this. Honestly, there isn't much more to say here. The game lasted me about 10 hours. Honestly, could have ended 2 hours earlier. The game dragged itself into an underwhelming finale. For some reason, at the end of the game, it goes into a long exposition sequence where the story is all dumped onto you all at once. The game is almost radio silent for a majority of its experience, and then ends in a really underwhelming boss fight. The threat is suddenly dealt with, making you wonder why we went on this adventure in the first place. The game should have ended at the plot twist. The letdown of the endgame is quite regrettable because there's clearly passion in that project. The director has hidden a message into the game speaking about his drive to make the project and sharing all of his feelings and apprehensions. The messenger wears its influences on its sleeve and doesn't hide itself. There's a great video out there of the creators of Ninja Gaiden playing the game and being pleasantly surprised. They invited them to play more to get feedback. They really wanted to make something great and were inspired. Unfortunately, the adventure ends on a lot of asset reuse, most of which was useless because it only brought attention to the fact that certain levels don't get new dialogue or bosses. You go into old levels and grab the key item to progress and move on. The items are often just lying there. Only the transition from 8 to 16-bit is worth your time. I don't feel like there's a need to always end on a positive note. I'll be honest, I think that The Messenger is a hard recommendation because of that latter half. I only finished it to make this review. If you're still interested, I recommend going for the hints as soon as possible. Not doing so might drag the experience further down. Figuring the end path wasn't a pleasant process, and it was not hard, but tedious. I do admit that this studio is still far more worthy of my money than most AAA studios right now, but that's mostly because of the lack of passion and identity politics. I still have to be fair with this game, and it has good ideas, but in the end, it overstayed its welcome.
勝ったで。結構なんか忍者流剣伝とかノリが違うんだなっていうリスペクトはされてても独自の世界が、ちょっとこう外した感じのギャグっぽいところもあるし、
そうですね、あれはないですか。アイデアとしてはすごく面白いと思います。
でも16ビットなんですよね。
そう。そこのね、まだこれだと関係がゲーム性にね、どう関係してるのかわかんないですけど、
なんか意味があればいいけどなと思って、あるって言うから気
に
なる。
完成版楽しみですよね。あれ行き来して何をするのかってちょっと興味ありますね。
なんで8ビットなのか、なんで16ビットなのかっていうのがなんかあるんでしょうね。